Misfits and Moguls, Episode 3, go! Hey everybody, welcome to Misfits and Moguls, Naked Truths of the Self-Employed. I am your host, Melissa Geisinger, recording live from Santa Rosa, California. Welcome to the show. Misfits and Moguls is a live streamed video podcast that hands the mic to your everyday entrepreneurs from struggling freelancers to successful millionaire and allows them to tell their stories unfiltered. We record live, which means two things. Number one, anything can happen. And number two, you can be a part of the show by submitting your comments on either Facebook or YouTube. If you're listening to the audio-only podcast, I encourage you to check out the website at misfitsandmoguls.com and look for when the next show is scheduled to go live and join us, please. Today, I am super excited to have with us my guest, Sydney Williams. Sydney is a friend of mine. She is the founder of the nonprofit organization Hiking My Feelings. She's an author of the book Hiking My Feelings, Stepping into the Healing Power of Nature, which I have here, visual aid. Check it out. Yes. Sydney is a former collegiate athlete and she was also a competitive skydiver. After facing unresolved trauma of a sexual assault and a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, she set out on a mission to turn her pain into power. She completed 2 40-mile thru hikes across Catalina Island, an accomplishment that inspired a way of life for her that sent her diabetes into full remission. Over the years, Sydney has been featured on the South by Southwest stage. She's been featured in Health Magazine, Diabetic Living Magazine, Huffington Post, Psychology Today, a U.S. News and World Report, and numerous other publications. She is awesome, in other words. When COVID is not a thing, she travels across the country in her Sprinter van, which is totally decked out, and she gives talks, she leads workshops and retreats, and hosts group hikes. Lately, though, it's all been virtual, and her programming currently includes programs like summit circles, virtual campfires, and inspiring members of her community to hike 1 million miles for diabetes awareness through Take a Hike Diabetes. I will not tell her entire life story for her. I will let her do more of that herself. But first, today's show is brought to you by myself, Melissa Geisinger. I will always and forever be a serial entrepreneur, but for my day job, I am a mortgage advisor with Finance of America. And if you are self-employed, or even if you're not, and you've been thinking about buying a house, you should reach out. I have workshops that I teach, as well as resources available specifically for helping first-time homebuyers. So if you want to know more, go to gohomewithmelissa.com or email me at melissa.geisinger@financeofamerica.com. Okay, without further ado, I am going to introduce my guest, Sydney Williams.
Hi.
Hey, Sydney. Yay, we did it. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's funny that I love your intro. Thank you. And you said I live in a Sprinter van, which is like my aspiration, but our van is old enough to buy beer. It's a 98 Chevy. So someday I hope to be in a fully decked out Sprinter van, and hopefully after Take a Hike Diabetes, that will be a possibility for us. But I was just like, oh, hey, I'm fancy now.
Well, as a non-van person, I'm like, oh, all vans are Sprinter vans.
Right.
It was sort of a slip of the tongue. My apologies for not.
Love it.
For deeming your life as more swanky than it actually is. Okay, So to start this off, we do a little thing, and you're gonna laugh. I don't know if you've seen any of the other shows so far, but you know me, I totally believe in transparency and telling, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But not all of my guests are comfortable with that level of bearing all. So I've got a system, okay? We're going to choose a safe word. So if I ask you something where it makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, you can use the safe word. If you don't feel like revealing all of the details. All right, what do you got?
Perfect. Giraffe.
Yes. Now I have to try and spell it. G-I...
R-A-F-F-E. Nailed it.
Yeah, okay. I got it. So we've got our safe word is giraffe.
Fantastic. This is fun.
All right. And this is some audience participation too. So if you look uncomfortable or feel like you might need to say the word giraffe, or if you do and I miss it, that people can comment and on the live streams and call me on it. All right.
Well, I will say I might end up having a bit of a frozen face. We're out in the middle of nowhere out here in the mountains east of San Diego, and sometimes our Wi-Fi is a little funky. So if my face is like frozen, like I look like I'm uncomfortable, chances are I'm probably not, but good looking out.
Well, you are super pixelated, which does add to the authenticity of your lifestyle. So it's good stuff. So let's hear it. So what's your background? So you own this nonprofit, but this was sort of a recent endeavor. How did you start out in your professional career?
Oh, wow. So after college, I went straight into corporate America and agency life. And my first job was at a PR agency, the largest global PR agency in their Chicago office. And my first job was writing tweets as the Wienermobile. So I've been working in marketing, mostly corporate communications, for 12 years. And then
you say the story so much that you have a straight face when you say Wienermobile. I just want to call attention to the fact.
Well, if you want to get into puns later, like I don't know if you have a speed round, but I can make all the hot dog puns really quickly for you. It's a wonderful time. There you go. There's one. Can't wait to catch up. There's two. You're welcome. So I did corporate agency life for a couple years, and then one summer I went to learn how to skydive, and then that took over my life for 4 years. So I was a competitive skydiver for 4 years and worked in the industry doing events and marketing for skydiving center in Chicago, and then we moved out to Southern California so I could train to be a world-class competitive skydiver. And that was 2010 to 2014, and then I left skydiving. I started my own company and ended it like 3 months later. I hated it. I realized that I was like all the way done with skydiving. So that was the end of the beginning for that one. And then I ended up going back to corporate because I was like, like I've been bumming it for like 4.5, 5 years now. I think I'd like to have a paycheck and some health insurance. So went back to corporate to the agency that I left to go. Like I worked at agency in Chicago and agency in Austin. And then when I went back to corporate, I ended up going back to the agency that I was working at before I left to skydive full time. So that was W2O Group. And I worked from home and I loved it. And I was making tons and tons of money. I was also drinking a bottle of wine to myself more often than I wasn't each night to help me fall asleep and just wind down after work. I was leading email marketing for NBC Universal, doing national commercial campaigns and leading an agency rebrand within the entire organization. And then I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and that kind of changed everything for me. So in late 2017, when I was diagnosed, I was like, okay, I am going to jump off the internet for like a full 30 days, which when your job is digital marketing, that's difficult to do. And I just completely overhauled my lifestyle. I switched up my nutrition plan. I started taking my medications as prescribed. I started walking around my neighborhood 30 to 45 minutes every day. And then when that got to be too easy, I graduated to local hiking trails, and then hiking kind of bit me. I had been hiking for a while, but it wasn't ever an everyday thing. And then it became an everyday thing because I got really protective of that time in the morning where I would just roll out of bed and go for a walk instead of like doom scrolling all morning long. And then I ended up leaving corporate to join my friend's startup as chief marketing officer. And I made it on that job for 95 days. I am not fit. That intense. My first job, like my first task was to raise $1 million for our first round of venture capital fundraising. And I had never done that before, but I've watched Shark Tank and I can Google, so it's like not that hard, right? That's not true. It's difficult to raise lots of money. So I started having panic attacks like every day. And this was while I was still diagnosed with diabetes. I had lost a bunch of weight, which was part of my management protocol. They caught the diabetes early, and type 2, you can do a lot of lifestyle changes to better manage the disease. And my goal was to get off medications because I didn't want to be on meds for the rest of my life. So I had lost a bunch of weight, but my blood sugar was still super elevated because stress is a huge contributing factor to diabetes management. And so I was just like, I don't know what's next, but I can't keep working like this. So I left the startup after 95 days. I didn't have a backup plan. We're not independently wealthy. I didn't have a trust fund I was sitting on. I had no savings. All I had were like a bunch of credit cards with a lot of available credit from when I was working in corporate. And I was like, okay, well, I'm smart. I'm scrappy. I'm really good at what I do. I want to make the world a better place. I don't know what comes next, but it's not this. So 4 days after I left the startup, I was hiking again. I was training for that second hike on the Catalina Trail. And I was at the top of a mountain that's about 25 minutes from where I'm sitting today, Stonewall Peak in San Diego, or outside of San Diego. And I was standing at the top of this mountain and I'm like, I should be freaking out. Like, I just gave up a 6-figure salary. I'm a newly diagnosed diabetic without health insurance. I'm the breadwinner in my marriage. I'm not baking any bread. There's none in the oven. What am I doing with my life and why am I so calm? I should be losing it up here. But I was like yoga zen on the top of this mountain. I was like, this is interesting. And so if you've ever read, I think it's like Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about like how you get an idea and if you don't run with it, like it'll manifest somewhere else and somebody will go do that idea. I had my like universal tube.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had this like universal 2x4 smack me across the face. And I was like, oh, well, instead of like my old coping mechanisms prior to being diagnosed with diabetes were eating and drinking my feelings. And I was like, since diabetes, like I wanted to be a gold star earning diabetes patient. So I couldn't keep eating Ben and Jerry's for breakfast and I couldn't keep drinking a bottle of wine to myself every night after work. So diabetes had helped me remove those coping mechanisms. And instead of eating and drinking my feelings, I was hiking my feelings. And I was like, okay, that's fun. But like, why was I eating and drinking my feelings to begin with? That was my next question, because as much as we make it socially acceptable in this society, we basically teach young girls, like, as soon as you have a breakup, like, just go get a pint of ice cream. You'll be fine, honey. So like that behavior carries on through life and we all drink like fish for the most part. And I was just like, where did these coping mechanisms come from? So hiking my feelings as it started was like first a blog post and a hashtag, and then this like container where I could explore my feelings and some unresolved trauma that I had experienced earlier in my life on the trail for the first time ever. And then after we did that hike across Catalina Island, that was where I connected some big dots for myself. And by the end of 2018, I was living in a van old enough to buy beer, touring the US and touring Southern California on a speaking tour and hosting hikes all over SoCal. And then we ended up turning that into a nationwide tour in 2019, which is where I got to meet you. And we hosted 140 events around the US in 2019. And that was just me and my husband. Like we were seeing if this would work. Like, is healing in nature a thing that people care about? Turns out, yeah, it is. Is trauma stuff that people are willing to talk about? Turns out, like, if you find the right groups, yeah, it is. And we wanted to not just like tell people the story of how hiking helped me heal my mind and body, but if I'm going to say hiking helped me heal my mind and body, I want you to experience that. So we would take people out for a hike in every city that we stopped in. So
and what was people's reactions when they would go out with you?
it was they had the same reaction I did. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I feel amazing. Oh my gosh, like I can think clearly. I don't have all these distractions that I have in my everyday life." One of the most interesting things that I heard, and this was actually on the book tour at the beginning of last year, was this gal was like, I've been hiking with my daughter, and what we realize is it's really helpful because we don't have to look at each other. So like she'll lead and I'll follow her, and we can talk about really heavy topics, but we don't have to have eye contact, which really like opens up our ability to have difficult conversations. And I was like, I didn't even realize, like, as I meet people and they tell me how it's experienced on their side, it gives me language to like articulate what I'm also feeling, because there's so much that happens for me on the trail. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like I've had some pretty difficult conversations with my husband on the trail because I didn't have to look at him. And like I am hypersensitive to facial reactions. It is a byproduct of growing up in the home I grew up in. I analyze every facial tick, like smiles, frowns, like whatever you're doing with your face. Like I pay attention to it. And it really distracts me, and it's way too much information for me to process. But on the trail, if I'm walking behind somebody or in front of somebody, I can just like open book more than normal, because there's not that intimidation factor of looking somebody straight in the face. So it really resonated with people. Like 2019 was so awesome, and we were set to do the same thing, to repeat that tour and host workshops and retreats and stuff along the way in 2020. And we were a week into the tour last year when COVID hit. I was at Joshua Tree National Park getting ready to host my first event in the national park system. Yeah. And that was the first one to get canceled. And then everything got canceled within a week.
Yeah. Before we get too deep into the COVID depression, I really want to draw attention to the fact that, what you have built, you have a direct impact on people's health and how they think about themselves and how they process feelings. Obviously you did not invent going for a hike to feel better. Like that's not, trademark Sydney,
right?
But you harnessed this idea,
right?
And, essentially built a structure around it to give people the tools in order to, harness the opportunity of having these experiences for themselves and using it as a way to process this stuff. It's made a huge impact on me, so I can, toot your horn all day long, but it's amazing. And the cool thing about who you are and the position that you're in is you're able to identify the value and construct this business around it. And you've got the knowledge and the backbone to actually put it into motion in a way that it's working, right? And be on your toes and take the hit of COVID.
Yeah.
And understand that, okay, this is a bad thing, and I'm going to have a bad day, and think for a minute that, oh crap, is it over? But then realize that I can scramble and figure out another path. So tell me about that. Like where, because I was there, I saw it, I witnessed it. Like, because we were planning for your retreat, and we're still waiting to go on this Catalina Island retreat.
Yeah. So 2019 was awesome, and it was kind of a whirlwind. And one of the things I want to say, like, I got a little bit of imposter syndrome, not going to lie, Melissa, when you posted the graphics about this episode, because I was like, how to build a small, sustainable nonprofit. I was like, who am I to tell anybody that story? Like, now, like, we literally just won our first grant. So now we are getting to the path of sustainability. But I read that and I was like, oh, that makes me want to vomit all over the place. Like, it just doesn't feel good.
I didn't say how to.
But like in a good way, because but yes, thank you. I appreciate that. But still, I was like, ooh, even building, like that sounds terrifying. But everything in 2019 felt so urgent, and it didn't it didn't necessarily make sense at the time. And I think that that's like my first, if people are like taking notes, the first note I would be is like follow your gut and trust that you know that the opportunity is right when it is that strong. Because in 2019, like we didn't know how we were going to get from point A to point B. Like we weren't making money yet. All I had were credit cards and like a couple people on Patreon throwing us like $10 a month. Like we were selling t-shirts like maybe $100 worth of t-shirts over the course of like the first 3 months or something. Like we were not, there was no reason logically, financially, or emotionally that I should have done what we did. But felt like I couldn't not do it. So 2019 felt like this big urgent rush, not even a rush, but like just this very purposeful journey around the country to like establish this community and meet people and talk to them face to face and like shake hands and kiss babies and all that stuff. Because like, and I'm not saying that I'm psychic and that I predicted COVID, because Lord knows I didn't, but like what we did in 2019, for as much of a risk as it was, for as much debt as I put on those credit cards, it saved us. Because we would, if we hadn't done that, or if we had tried to have like a really solid 3 to 5 year plan built before we hit the road, none of this would have been possible. So when we did have COVID happen, we had so much traction and so much momentum building because we were getting people outside and away from their devices, that when COVID happened, and at first we couldn't even go to parks anymore, we couldn't do gatherings. And now we have no virtual presence. Like, I'm sorry, my Instagram account and my sporadic emails are not a virtual education platform. Like, I had used enough of my marketing skills in the wake of like recovering from my marketing career, because that was a big part of it too, was like realizing how good I was at what I was doing and how sick I was making myself and the different communities that I was marketing to. Because I was teaching people how to eat hot dogs and drink wine and sit down and binge watch NBC programs. Like, that's not making the world a better place at all. It's not, certainly not making it healthier. So I was doing like just enough on the marketing side of things. Like, I hadn't even pulled out my whole toolbox because I just felt so gross about what I had been doing for my whole career. So when COVID happened and they were like, all right, you have no events and events are your bread and butter, I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, we were getting to the point like March 2020, we were going to be able to pay ourselves for the first time. Hasn't happened yet still, but like we were going to be able to make money. Like, we were doing a book tour where the bookstores bought books, people bought books on the hikes. We had a whole event series around the books, so they're paying for the hike and the book. Like, I really figured it out. I was like, oh my gosh, 2020 is going to be like gangbusters. We're going to do these workshops, we're going to do these retreats, it's going to be awesome. And so when that all got ripped out from underneath us, the first 2 weeks I was in the fetal position and I had a complete nervous breakdown. The drive from Joshua Tree back to the ranch, so I'm at the Reggae Ranch, which is our friends Sue and Dustin. They bought this property out here. They're building this incredible artist retreat for musicians to come and create incredible music. And they invited us to park here when we're not on tour and when we're not out on adventures. So the drive from Joshua Tree, where our first event was canceled, back here, after I had planned on being on the road again for a whole year, I was sobbing, like full waterfall, ugly cry sobbing for the entire drive. And then for the next 2 weeks, like I was literally in the fetal position in the van, barely eating, did not hike, did not get out of bed like at all. And then I was like, okay, pity party's over. What are we going to do? Because like, this is bad. And I thank Sue. I hope she knows how impactful it was when she said this, but she was like, hey, Sydney, by the way, you're not the only person impacted by this. And it was just the like kick in the butt I needed. Cause I was like, when I had to postpone the retreat, like I got on this call with the people that were coming to the retreat and I was sobbing. I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. We have to postpone this. They're like, Sydney, it's not your fault. I was like, but yes, it is. Like, I felt like I invented COVID and I'm the reason nobody gets to go on this retreat. And I'm the reason everything's melting down, because it was just so shocking. Like, the initial just smack in the face was so much emotionally, because we had been building so much momentum and things were going so well, and then nothing. So I was like, okay, what were we going to do on the road, and can I make that a virtual offering? And then that's what we ended up doing, and it ended up saving us time and time again last year.
Yeah, incredible. And I can't help but think like what what Barry's doing in all of this, because it sounds like, just your husband is sort of like the silent second. He's he's not the face of the business, but I mean, he's your partner, and he's trusting in your gut and your aha moments at tops of mountaintops. And has he ever been like, you're a little crazy and I don't know if I want to do this with you?
No. What he did say was, I was like, after the pity party in my fetal position for the 2 weeks, I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. He's like, well, if you want to give up, like, we need to go get jobs and rent an apartment. Like, that's what we need to do. So we should probably start looking. And I was like, except here's the deal. Barry's Mr. Miyagi. Did Barry mean that? No. But Barry knows exactly what to say to get me back in gear and snap out of my own pity party. And I was like, you do not take away my dream. Like, you are the person who believes in me. This is BS. Like, and I just lost it. And then I was
I think they call that reverse psychology.
Yeah. And he totally did. And then I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We were supposed to hike around Chicago. We're doing a 20-night virtual 2 hours every night. I'm interviewing 64 guests. We're going to raise money. We're going to build a retreat center. We're speeding up that plan. And then I'm going to take every workshop we were going to do and turn it into a virtual course. It's going to be 12 weeks long. And then I just like threw all the pasta at the wall and saw what stuck. And it was enough to keep me busy and enough to like help me not completely lose my mind in the wake of like losing everything, because I put everything on the line. I racked up tons of debt. I maxed out every credit card I had in 2019 to start this organization. And so we got our IRS exemption for our nonprofit the week after COVID hit. So I was like, I didn't even get to celebrate that because I was crying myself to sleep all day long. So I was like, and then with that, it's like, okay, now we have our IRS exemption. Now we can apply for grants, but all of the grant writing all the grant funding organizations are redirecting funds to COVID relief. Like the entire outdoor industry, everything they did, they either stopped their grant programs or they redirected it to people that were doing stuff specifically with COVID. And I was like, I don't even have a track record to show. Like, I don't have any organizational history. We literally just incorporated. We just got our IRS exemption. I was like, I don't know. Like, all I have is the fact that I can say we hosted 140 events last year. We have X amount of followers on Instagram. Like, those were the only metrics I had. I had no runway to show what we were capable of except for that stuff. So I was just like, well, I mean, the only thing I can do now is just build what I want to do. Cause like we had always, when we were on the road in 2019, a lot of people were like, hey, where can we come do this work with you someday? Like, are you guys going to keep touring? Are you guys going to build a place? We were like, well, eventually we'd like to build a retreat center. And so I was like, I don't have the capital to start building a retreat center. I don't have the wherewithal to start fundraising for one, like seriously fundraising for one. I can't go like buy land. I can't go really do anything. But what I can do is I can build programming and like see how people like it and do that now while we wait to build some kind of something that organizations can get behind that people will offer grants for. And so I just like dug deep and got creative and thought about everything I've ever wanted to do, but was too scared to give myself permission to do. And I was like, well, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We literally almost lost everything. I live in a van. I've already sold all my stuff. I have nothing left to lose. I'm going to take a big, big bet on myself and hope that everything that I've ever done in my entire life has trained me for this moment and that will be okay. Turns out that's what happened. So I'm not mad about it, but it was really scary in that moment because I was like, you know, a 6-figure salary is a phone call away. Like I could go back to corporate. I could walk right back into agency life and at the expense of my health. And I don't ever want to have to make that choice. But like ultimately, I could walk back into a professional job with everything I've done for hiking my feelings and have the resume of my dreams. But I didn't want to have to do that. And I'm really glad that I didn't quit because every time that I really, really, really wanted to give up, on the other side of choosing not to was some little shred of light in the tunnel that like was a universal nudge. Like, you got this, like, keep going. Like, it was just enough to keep me like working toward it.
Yeah. That's incredible. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are glad that you didn't give up, myself included.
Oh, thank you.
When your entire sort of business structure is dependent upon you sharing your life story and the worst parts of your life, being a victim of a sexual assault, being diagnosed with disease, and countless friends dying, and all of the awful trauma that you've been through. I mean, I imagine it's hard to talk about sometimes. Do you struggle with it at times, just being that vulnerable?
I want to say no, but I don't know that that's entirely true. I think I don't struggle with talking about sexual assault because I kept that to myself for 11 years. I'm making up for lost time at this point.
Yeah.
After the assault, I didn't tell anybody for 11 years. I didn't go to the hospital after it happened. I didn't tell the police. I didn't tell my family. Like, my husband was the first person I told. And when I told him, we had been together for 7 years, married for 5 years. So as far as the sexual assault goes, I don't have a problem talking about it. One, because if I didn't hear other survivors talk about what they went through, I wouldn't be on this planet today. So if me continuing to talk about it, one, I don't mind. And two, I believe that by continuing to talk about it, I help people find the language to describe what happened to them, which can help them on their own healing journey from that personal experience. So on that side of things, not afraid to talk about it. I have started to go deeper on that topic in spaces where I feel safe, like getting specific about what happened and how it impacted me. But in general, I have no problem saying that I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I don't want to say I wear that proudly, but I do, because I got through it and I'm still here to talk about it. Because there were a lot of times I swore I would take that secret to the grave, and a couple times I almost did. So on the other side of stuff like diabetes with type 2, I don't have a problem talking about that either. Like, at first I did, because the stigma was so negative and
Yeah, there's a
so
lot of
just
shame associated
overbearing.
with it and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially like even within the diabetes community, and that's a big part of what we're doing this year, is trying to unite the diabetes community. Even within the diabetes community, because type 1 and type 2 are so different, a lot of people with type 1 are like, well, I didn't bring this upon myself and you did. And it's like, okay, maybe, but like also, I haven't met anybody who lives with diabetes who wants to have this disease. So at the very least, that's a really good place to start finding connection, even though the two diseases are so different. So from a type 2 diabetes perspective, I almost feel like it's my responsibility, not an obligation, but a responsibility that I take very seriously to speak about it, because it is the best thing that ever happened to me. Being diagnosed with diabetes saved my life, which is, on the surface, sounds completely backwards because it's a chronic illness that I will be managing for the rest of my life. But in the process of being managed with, or being diagnosed with, and learning how to manage diabetes, that was what helped me connect the dots on the trauma, how that had informed the coping mechanisms, and how those coping mechanisms led to the diagnosis. And so now my work is deeply rooted. Like, I still care very much about supporting survivors of sexual assault, but my work is more like, I've really zoomed in on the diabetes prevention and management piece and uniting the diabetes community, because it is one thing that everybody, like, we've all been through something traumatic. And I find that when I lead with, I have a story about sexual assault, people are like, ew, I don't want to talk about that. But when I'm like, hey, I reversed my diabetes, I'm like, ooh, tell me more. So
I mean,
when I get into a room,
it's an insane story. Like, you never hear that. So yeah, lean into it, right?
yeah. Well, and so when I get into a room and I start talking about diabetes, and then I'm like, and you want to know how I got here? Then I can talk about sexual assault, and then people aren't so
Yeah.
scared of it. So
Yeah.
the sexual assault is still very much a forward, front stage, front row piece of my story. But now I've figured out how to be able to talk about it without everybody's eyes glazing over, and without everybody getting really, really like bundled up, because nobody wants to talk about sexual assault. And
Yeah.
that's
So
half the reason why it's as big of a problem as it is.
yeah, definitely. I can relate to that as well. Tell me more about the Take a Hike diabetes program.
Yeah, so Take a Hike Diabetes is our initiative this year. Um, as the overarching goal, we're looking to hike 1 million miles for diabetes awareness. And as much as I love hiking, that is not possible for me to do by myself in 1 year. So we're activating the community and all the friends we haven't met yet to help us get to that goal. And the reason that I want to do this is one, hiking has absolutely radically changed my life. And especially when it comes to diabetes management, it has been a beautiful tool for it because I attribute my success in managing diabetes to my doctor making it really easy to understand, and that there's 4 factors that impact your blood sugar: food, medicine, exercise, and stress. And so while I don't really get into the medicine side of things, hiking is a great way to encompass the food, exercise, and stress part because, like, if you're going for a big long hike, you don't want to feel like weighted down by food that just makes you feel like comfy when you eat it, but lethargic when you're moving. Hiking is really good for stress reduction. It's really good for mental health. It's really good for a spiritual connection to something bigger than yourself because the outdoors is a magical place to spend some time. And obviously, from a physical health perspective, like walking doesn't hurt anyone. So, it's a really great tool for managing diabetes, and it's a really great container in which people can start to understand how to live their life in mindful, healthy ways. So, aside from the Million Mile Challenge, that's one part of it. And we're partnered with a really great app called Kilter. And so they are a fundraising platform and a fitness tracking platform. So they connect with your favorite fitness
Wow.
tracker. Right now they support Google Fit, Apple Health, Map My Run, Strava, and Garmin. And so once you register for the event, we have 3 registration tiers: 15, 35, and $50. At 35, you get our awesome glow in the dark Nalgene water bottle. And at the $50 mark, you get a hat. And then we have fundraising milestones that you hit along the way to earn extra prizes. But once you register, then you sync it up with you download the Kilter app, sync that with your fitness tracker, and then any hike, walk, run, rolling workout if you're in a wheelchair, all of those tracked workouts in that distance counts towards our Million Mile goal. So I'm really excited to share that we
So
hit
freaking
5,000
cool.
miles this week. Yeah, so we
So
hit 5,000 miles this week.
incredible.
Yeah.
So how can people get involved? They can go to your website.
Yes,
And
they
does
can
it
go to
cost anything?
hikingmyfeelings. So we have a free 30-day program, which does not cost anything. The activity challenge is a fundraiser for our organization. So your registration fee is a donation to Hiking My Feelings. And you can go to hikingmyfeelings.org/diabetes to learn more about those. And then the last aspect of the tour or of the campaign is our tour, where we're hiking 3 different urban adventures to showcase the community leaders, organizations, and brands that are either making the outdoors more inclusive or supporting their local diabetes community. Because one of the things we learned in 2019 was that there are a lot of people that don't feel safe or represented in the outdoors, and those communities are also living with the highest prevalence of diabetes. So we're looking to connect those dots and get the people that don't feel safe or represented outdoors into the outdoors, so then community health can improve.
That's incredible. So are you also able to, I think you already mentioned this, but you're also able to kind of leverage the diabetes angle now in order to apply for grants and actually get some money coming into the organization that way, right?
Yeah, so we were just awarded our first grant from an organization called Beyond Type 1. And that grant is the Diabetes Difference Makers Grant. So that will help us cover technology and operation costs for the program. And then we've got some incredible partners and sponsors that we're finalizing details with right now for the campaign, who are joining us and making big, like, I say big, like $5,000 is a ton of money to us. And I know in like the venture world, that's nothing, but I kind of think we're doing this like Bernie Sanders, like a couple bucks here and there at a time. So
Right.
we haven't won any like really big grants yet, but the contributions that we're getting from our partners and sponsors are absolutely making a difference for us. So we're thankful for everything we have so far.
So do you actually consider the organization to be self-sustaining at this point? Are you paying yourself?
No, I'm not paying myself, so I guess no. We keep the
Right, it
bills
depends on
paid
how you
by
define that.
right. Yeah, so I don't make money from Hiking My Feelings. Barry and I still haven't earned a paycheck from this organization. But between book sales and my other writing assignments were able to keep the bills paid. And like, again, as a fat reminder, our bills are very minimal because we live in a van. We don't have a house. We don't have a mortgage. We don't have Wi-Fi to pay for. Like, we keep our expenses and our overhead as low as humanly possible. So we've been doing van life for almost 3 years to be able to build this organization in this way.
Yeah. So hiking has become your identity, your work, your everything. Is it still fun? Are you able to do it still just for you?
Yeah, in fact, we did a really great hike yesterday and a really great hike today. In fact, like since COVID, most of the hiking has been for me. When we were going around the country, it was funny, like between when I quit my last job before Hiking My Feelings started and when we were in Montana in 2019. So we started in Southern California, went to Colorado, Utah, up the West Coast, and then we ended up we didn't end up, but then when we got to Glacier National Park in Montana, that was August. So that was like 6 months after we hit the road and a full year after Hiking My Feelings started. It took that long for hiking to be fun for me. In that, the hikes between then and all the ones leading up to that, I was still doing some really deep personal work because hiking for me is a way for me to process trauma and emotion and sort out my mental health. And for the hundreds of miles that we hiked between Southern California and Glacier National Park in Montana, I was crying on the trail. I was doing like deep excavation of like all these painful memories and stuff like that. And we did the Highline Trail in Glacier and we got done. And Barry's like, "Did you cry at all?" I was like, "No." I was like, "Is it possible that I just had fun on a hike and that people do this for a good time? Like, I don't have to do months of work after one hike. Like, I can just go out and walk and have fun." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I see why people like this. This is a good time." So
I think I just had my first experience of that recently, because up until very recently, I basically always said, like, if somebody's not crying, it's not a real hike. Like, you either need to be like close to death or just have this emotional breakthrough that just leaves you sobbing where only you and your dog and the bears can hear you.
Yes. So that was my experience. I was crying, sobbing, doing the work on the trail for over a year. And then in Montana, I was like, okay, I like hiking. This is really fun. And I hadn't actually had a good Hiking My Feelings, cry your face off hike in a while. And I had one last week and I was like, oh, I thought I had done all the work. And here I am, like waterfall face on the trail here at the ranch. And I was like, oh, it's nice to be back. Like, cause I was like, did I lose it? Like, did I lose my special sauce? And I was like, no, like, I feel like I've just been like, just really enjoying spending time outside, especially during COVID. Like, we live out in the middle of nowhere, which has its disadvantages, but in a COVID time, I'm just so dang thankful to be able to stay here and call this place home for Hiking My Feelings while we get it up and running. And the ability to be able to just go, like, walking on the country road out here is a hike. Like, we live in the mountains, so we're going up and down canyons, just walking the road, let alone the trail. So, I do like it. And I try not to like hiking very much. Like it is the organization. It is the book. It is an everyday part of my life. But I'm really trying not to let that be my entire identity. And I don't know what isn't about hiking right now, but that's something that I'm actively practicing this year moving forward. It's just making sure that I don't get so far into it like I did with skydiving, where I hated skydiving by the time I was done. So I think to that end, because skydiving is mostly, and I don't want to say selfish, like in a negative way, but it was an endeavor for myself. This is so much bigger than me and my story. And I've said that from the beginning before that wasn't true. And now it is true because other people have been impacted by the work. But I think that's why this is going to be different. In fact, I know that's why this is going to be different, because it's not just me. It's not just hiking. Like, I've always envisioned this as a marketer first. And like my first vision for Hiking My Feelings was like, this is a campaign for the outdoor industry. And it's like blank my feelings, hiking, kayaking, fishing, mountain biking, climbing, whatever it is. Like, the through line of all those activities is that you don't have a device in your face. and you're out in nature. And so I've always said it's bigger than me and it's bigger than my story. And now that our community is growing, that is true. And then that's not just something I say to myself to like keep myself motivated to keep going. Like that part is actually true now. And that's why I don't think this will ever be like, given everything we've been through in 2020, and just the sacrifices we made to do this work and to build this organization, there is still nothing that I'd rather be doing with my time or talent. And this is the only thing that I want to do right now. And I still work. I probably work harder and work more hours than I did when I was in corporate, but because this is ours, and like not like me and Barry, we don't own it, by the way. Like you don't fit. So this is ours. Like, I mean, and by that, I mean like the Hiking My Feelings family. This is everybody's organization. So that's what keeps me going. And that's why I still love doing it, even though I work all the.
Uh-oh. We lost Sydney.
I'm back.
There you are. Hi.
Am I here? Yay. Okay.
I got scared there for a second. In your book, you have a chapter called "I Can Do Hard Things," and I love it because that became your mantra. And I have a mantra too when I hike or when I face anything sort of monumentally difficult, which has been a trend the last few years. Mine is "I am the tree is me." It's, I want to channel strength. I want to channel, rooting myself, grounding myself. Do you have a new mantra? Do you have several? What are you using right now?
It's interesting. I feel like, and this isn't to discredit mantras because they've served me really well. I don't currently have one, at least not one that sticks out. And I think that's because for me, the mantra was the grounding when my brain and my body were dysregulated. And like when my nervous system was out of control, when I was having a trauma response, like the mantra got me back into my body. And now I feel like, and this is going to sound like some hippy dippy woo woo stuff if you're not into the mind body connection or if you haven't explored it for yourself, but I am so back in my body now that I don't need a mantra to root me in that. Like I just feel so deeply at home in who I am and the work I'm doing and the impact I want to make on the world that I don't need that mantra to help regulate everything I've got going on. Because for a while, that was the only way I got through it was the mantras and stuff like that.
Yeah. Cool. Tell me a good pooping in the woods story.
Oh my Lord. Well, my favorite and the famous one is so on our second, was it the first one? It was the first hike. So it was my first backpacking trip across Catalina Island. And I say this not to say that I am better now than I was then, but this was 80 pounds ago. It was my first backpacking trip. I had no idea what I was doing. I was in the worst shape of my life. I rolled off the couch onto the trail, filled up a backpack with way too much stuff, and decided to go hike across an island. That was the hike that started this whole journey. So I'm really thankful that I gave myself the go ahead to go do that, even though I didn't fit the mold of looking at or feeling outdoorsy. But after God, I love this story. So on the second day on the Trans Catalina Trail, if you're going in like the original order of the trail, you go from Blackjack Campground past the airport in the sky where they have this really great restaurant and then down into Little Harbor Campground, which is like the first of 3 campgrounds on the beach. And so the trek from Blackjack to the airport is like 2 miles, I think. And it's not terribly difficult, but when you're wildly unprepared for a backpacking trip with close to 40 pounds on your back and you got a blister a 1/4 mile in on the first day, everything is hard. So the trip in the morning, I woke up and like my feet were just covered in blisters. I was a hot mess. I barely slept. And then we get to the airport in the sky and I had been reading like blog posts and watching YouTube videos and I had heard that the bison burger was like top notch at this place. So I was like, I'm going to get the bison burger. So I went, we had the bison burger, we fill up our water, we start making our way down. And now Catalina is Southern California desert island hiking. So there's no tree canopy, there's no coverage, there's no nothing to hide behind. And I am far enough away to where I can't run back to the restroom, but I'm in the middle of an exposed open mountainside and there is nowhere to hide. And I'm like down the mountain. So up here on this ridgeline is where they do like the eco tours and they have Jeeps full of tourists looking for bison where I am standing and about to shit my pants. So it's an emergency situation. I was like, Barry, what do I do? He's like, well, I mean, you poop your pants or you drop trowel. Like, what are you going to do? So I like found a bush. I barely got my pants down in time. And in the beginning of the book, like leading up to the story, when I was trying on this apparel, because I had never been backpacking before, this was my first like set of hiking clothes. In the dressing room, I was trying on these pants and the buttons snapped instead of like buttoning. And I had this vision in the dressing room before we went on this trip. I was like, oh my gosh, like, first of all, I had to buy the biggest size pants that they had there. They did not have extended sizing at that store. And I was like sausage squeezing into these size 16 pants. Like I was just like sucking in like my life depended on it, got them closed. And I had this like nightmare vision of like this button popping off in the backcountry because I'm like exploding out of these pants. And then like Barry's like blind in the backcountry. So like I was standing. Yeah. So I was like, I had this vision in this dressing room. I was like, oh my gosh, why do these pants snap? Like they should have buttons. That's more secure. And then my husband won't be blind in the backcountry. But I tell you what, when I was squatting in an emergency, I just like ripped him off like tearaway pants and I just dropped trowel. And it was awful. Like there was no time to dig a hole. Barry had a Kleenex and like, that was all he had. And I was just like, what? There's like, and I'm on like the slope of a mountain. And this is like a nasty situation and it is sliding and I'm like trying not to like step in my sliding pile of poop. It was a whole thing. So there's my poop story. I pooped on the side of Catalina Mountain, probably for all the tourists to see. They were hoping for bison. What they saw was my adorable, unprepared butt, bare ass pooping on the side of a mountain. So there's that. If they saw it and they read that book, they'll be like, I was there. Because it was a thing. It was a whole fiasco. And then 15 minutes later, it happened again. So
that's golden. That is just wonderful. I mean,
You're welcome.
I wish I could
have a nice dinner.
I wish I could say that I can't relate, but I have a couple of my own similar high traffic emergency scenarios. Let me just say to our dear audience, if I can give one piece of advice for you to walk away with today is don't eat chorizo before you hike. This is bad idea.
That's fair.
Oh, all right. Well, if we still have any listeners, I want to actually offer them the opportunity to ask Sydney any questions or leave any comments. If you would like to ask Sydney, go ahead and leave a comment on Facebook or YouTube, and we will go ahead and post it up. Let me ask you this, Sydney. What would you recommend to anyone who is interested in beginning to hike their feelings?
Oh, this is good. So, first things first, like go off for a hike. Like I'm assuming that you know how to get out to the outdoors safely and you have like the bare minimum of proper equipment. That's like, that's the baseline I'm establishing. So assuming that you're already hiking and you want to start hiking feelings, the best way to do it is to start paying attention. So for me, deeply intense physical activity is the thing that drums up these feelings that we then hike through. So when that happens, I always stop and I just ask myself, I'm like, okay, what am I feeling? Like name the emotion. Is this anger, anxiety, sadness, joy, celebration? Name the feeling and then see if you can feel where you feel it in your body. Like for me, when I start feeling anxious, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest. Or when I start feeling nervous, I have like a pit in my stomach. So what am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? And then have I felt this before? And if you have felt it before, then try to think back to when the last time you felt that feeling was, because you can do this on the trail. You can do this while you're scrolling through social media. You can do this while you watch TV. You can do this when you read my book. Like, I encourage people when they buy the book to like take a pen, and every time you feel triggered or feel something, write what you're feeling in the margin next to what you just read. Because as you start to identify the root of where these feelings come from, you can start to identify trends that can lead you to areas that might need some healing. So if in my book you feel incredibly anxious when I start talking about sexual assault, maybe you are just, empathizing with the fact that sexual assault is a terrible thing to experience. But also, like, if you've had an experience like that, and this is giving you language to understand that what happened to you was assault, then you can start to make notes about that and then start to seek help for the things that you are experiencing. So what am I feeling? Where do I feel it on my body? And when was the last time I felt this? Those are 3 really great questions to ask yourself if you're interested in the hiking my feelings part of it. And then you're always welcome to come join our family. Like, we've got a really great online community that's free. And then we've got some paid offerings as well that are low cost to help you dig into this work. We have various programs, different resources available for people that are.
What platform is it on? It's not, you guys were on Facebook to start, and now you've moved over to another platform.
Yeah. We were on Facebook, and when I think of Facebook, I don't think of healing. So we moved to Mighty Networks, which is structured similarly to Facebook. It feels like structurally, user experience wise, it's similar to a Facebook group, but you don't get all the notifications and spam and political ads and like all the stuff that makes Facebook gross. That doesn't live on that platform. So when you go to the Hiking My Feelings platform, it's all Hiking My Feelings all the time. So you can come there with the intention of healing and not get pulled out of that by being on another network.
Awesome. Well, we've got a shy audience today. We just have Charlotte, who says,
all right,
great job, ladies.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Cool. Awesome. Well, if anybody ever has questions, if they watch this back later, if they listen back on the podcast, we're at Hiking My Feelings on Instagram. Feel free to send me a note there. Our community is family.hikingmyfeelings.org. That's our social network and our resource center. And anything I can do to help anybody along their journey at any point, I'm more than happy to answer questions when I can, or point you in the right directions if I don't have the right answers.
Well, thank you so much, Sydney, for hanging out with me today. Your story is awesome. I know that it's definitely going to reach somebody and affect their lives in a positive way, like it did mine. And I can't wait to, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on all of the wood, see you in March. And
as of right now, it's on. So yeah, we're about to start. We're contacting our friends at the ferry to make sure that we can get over to the island safely. But we talked to our outfitters on the island, and we are good to go. So we will keep you posted. But as of right now, it's on and we're happening. So
heck yeah. Yay. All right. So hopefully that is the first of many more hiking retreats to come.
Yes.
That's awesome. All righty. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, guess what? We're going to do one question because it came in late.
Yay!
A question from Ron Leitz. What is the best way to start conditioning for through hiking?
That is a great question, Ron. And I will say the best way to start conditioning is to just get out there. So I would take a look at what kind of through hike you want to do. That's one of the reasons why I did Catalina Island as my first backpacking trip, was because it is a through hike. You go from one end of the island to the other. And so it kind of eliminated a lot of the scary things. Cause full disclosure, I want to be a Triple Crown hiker. I want to do the AT, the PCT, and the CDT. So I want to go hike all the miles. But before I did that, I wanted to know, do I like hiking for days on end? Can I sleep on the trail? What's it like to filter water? So pick something that's accessible to you, that's a little bit shorter, maybe like a couple days to start. And if you don't already have equipment, definitely check with a local outdoor like retailer type store. They can help you with like finding the right gear and how to pack a backpack and map and compass classes and stuff like that. But as far as conditioning goes, just start hiking. I like to hike every day when I can. So we have a hike that we do on the property that's about 4 miles long. And we do that as much as possible. And then we just gradually work up from there. And so when we were training for our backpacking trip through Yosemite, we would hike in the morning every day with our backpacks fully loaded just to kind of get our legs used to it. Ultimately, hiking is backpacking is an extremely physical activity, but it's also extremely mentally taxing. So make sure you're taking care of your mental. Did I just die?
Oh, you're back.
Okay. Where'd I drop?
It's a good way to leave it. Did I just die?
Yeah.
Cut. And there we go.
Yeah. So just hike as much as you can and hike with weight. Hike with your backpack on. Do that and then go out there and go for it. But I wouldn't like roll off the couch and go do a through hike like the Pacific Crest Trail. I would do some shorter stuff first. Like the Catalina Island's great. Yosemite has a really great backpacking trail called the Grand Canyon of the Tuolumne. We did that this summer. We did it in I think it was 5 days, 54 miles. And that gives you some really beautiful experience in the backcountry where you're filtering your own water and stuff like that. Catalina is kind of like a bougie first backpacking trip because all the campgrounds are established and they have water at all the campgrounds and you're never that far away from civilization. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. And it's a difficult hike. And then you can kind of graduate to some other stuff from there. But depending on where you're from, pick something a little bit shorter and go out and see if you like it. And then just keep hiking and do a lot of research because that's the biggest part of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sydney. All right, let's try this again.
Yay! Thank you.